Well, as advertised, I have here Chris Jones from Abilene, Texas. And Chris, first time on the podcast. I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last year, I would say. Introduce yourself for anybody that doesn't know you.
Yeah, my name's Chris Jones. I'm an evangelist out here in Abilene, Texas. Um, I've been doing it for like 3 years now. Before that, I was a technician, software engineer. I don't know, cabinetry guy. I kind of did everything. So I don't know what else there is to say.
Very good. Well, we've had some conversations about AI software pertaining to sermon writing and Bible study, and we had a really good conversation the other day. I wish we had just had a microphone plugged up and recorded that. So I said, come on the podcast. And I feel like you have more expertise in this area than I do. Whatever reason that is, I feel like you're probably more technologically savvy than I am. And let's get into that. But before we do, let's kind of found ourselves or create a foundation with Scripture. This is 5 Minute Bible Study. And so I had a scripture that came to my mind when thinking about this, and you had one that came to your mind. I'll read mine. I'll go first here. In 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15, Paul talking to the young evangelist, he said, "Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." And I think of that passage because, and we'll talk about how AI is being used to almost replace original thought, personal study and digging. And I feel like that's a good passage to keep in mind when we're considering this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Uh,
Yeah, so my passage was more of Acts 17:11, where it talks about the Bereans, and they took these things home and studied it for themselves. You know, it's there's so much data. I mean, we live in a world that's flooded with data. That's kind of unique to the last maybe like 50 years. There's just so much information out there, particularly the last like 25, 30 years. There's so much information out there. And being to sift through it and come to your own conclusions and using your own mind instead of relying on other things or other people or AI in itself is, I think, absolutely critical.
yeah, that passage is never bad for any context. I feel like Acts 17:11.
I think it's incredibly relevant to the subject today. I really do believe it's incredibly relevant.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And so we have a few questions here. We'll get into why really this was a provoking conversation to have. It's something that's come up in conversation multiple times over the last year. I've had a couple of brothers, actually like 3 brothers from church, who have come up to me and asked me what I think about Bible study using AI, incorporating that. And I know that you've had a lot. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But I have a list of questions here. I wanted to start off with the biggest, baddest one of them all. And do you think that AI software, whether it's ChatGPT, Microsoft's Copilot, whatever, do you think it's all the mark of the beast?
um, I think you need to be the Marines to take these things home and study a little bit more. That's my answer. No, I don't. I don't think anything like that. No, I do believe it's going to be incredibly. It could be probably one of the greatest tools for the Brotherhood, or be one of the most devastating things that has happened in a while. I think it could go either way. To be completely honest with you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we got that out of the way. So, with that being said, are you a fan of it? I mean, is it something that you think? Oh, you kind of answered that just now, but are you personally a fan?
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of jumped on the bandwagon when AI first came out several years ago, kind of before like it was mainstream at all. And it's so funny. I programmed a bunch of little tools to like interact with my computer and do this and do that, and now all those things are all integrated into them, and I didn't have to do all that work. But I mean, I jumped on the bandwagon. I saw the light of this, right? I saw how incredibly powerful it can be, and not only just in personal life and organization, things like that, but also in particularly studying the Bible. I think it's a massive resource, but there needs to be some caution to it. So yeah, I'm a fan.
By the way, do you do like coding, software coding and stuff?
Absolutely. I don't know exactly how many languages I write, but probably in the 20s, something like that, ranging from tag languages like HTML all the way up into C. I used to do some assembly, but I don't really do that. Anyone's familiar with assembly? That's a really old, literally hard coding the chips type deal. And I kind of do everything in between C++. I just get into Python, React JS, that kind of stuff. So if anybody's listening, call me. I want to be friends with you.
Yeah, that all that goes way over my head. Have no clue what you're talking about. But I intentionally asked you that because I want people to know that you do have some technological expertise here, something that I don't have, and you actually have. You explained to me kind of the way that AI works and the way it's designed, what it's designed for, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's super helpful. Why don't we get into that actually? So, as far as you're concerned, what are some things that people need to know about AI software that should shape the way that we use it, and particularly for Bible study?
Yeah, so you have to understand what I mean, not to get too technical, but AI is built on what's called a neural net. Okay. And what this means in layman's term is they put data in and they're getting data out. And there's a bunch of things they can change in the middle. And then they look at the output and say, is this actually what we want? And if it's not, then they change all the stuff in the middle and it gives a good answer. When it gives a good answer, they do something called reinforcement training. And this is what people need to like understand when it comes to AI is then they take that output and they literally give it to a person and then they ask, is this a good answer? And if it's not, they punish the model, right? And if it's good, then they reward the model. It's like a game to the AI. And they're trying to, it's literally trying to give you the answers you want to hear. And that's probably where the caution, what you really need to understand. And so things like I don't think most people understand this. I heard a preacher say, it's wonderful at giving outlines of sermons and stuff like that, which it is. It's brilliant on that. But if you didn't like that or you didn't like the outline of that chapter, you just ask it again. I don't like that. Give what you don't understand you're doing is you're giving the model context to understand who you are. So, like for instance, we use the word brotherhood. There's probably not a lot of denominations that use the word brotherhood the way that we do. So if you're typing and you use that word, the AI knows what that means. And so the more information it gets on you, the more that it collects, the more it's going to give you an answer that you want to hear rather than maybe an accurate answer. And it's going to become an echo chamber. And that's my fear with AI is like it's going to become an echo chamber for us. So I don't know. Maybe I went a little too far there, but
I thought you got to it. And to illustrate your point, I was at the gym the other day, and I just watch some videos sometimes while I'm working out. And there was Red Pen Logic. I like some of his videos. He's short and to the point, and he gives some good apologetic information. Well, on this one, he was reacting to a video by a Muslim girl who's become very popular on TikTok. And one of the things that she's done, I can't even remember the account. You could probably find her easily, but she will ask AI. She's like, AI, if you were going to join a religion, what would you join? And AI says, Islam, absolutely. And she's like, see? And for people that have no clue about how AI works, that could, I can see how that would be very convincing and very like, catch your attention. So the guy from Red Pen Logic, he's a Christian, and he obviously does not agree with that answer from that particular AI response. So then he asks his phone to prove to the audience this is so subjective to what it's learned about each person as an individual, and it tells him, oh, I would become a Christian, absolutely. So I felt like that was something I've seen very recently that just proved your point.
yeah, so there's kind of two sides to that. One, when you're immediately talking to any of these chatbots, it's learning context through there, and it may be very subtle things like it maybe you misspell a word or maybe the way you construct a sentence. You remember it's been trained on the entire corpus of the internet. I mean, there's a lot of data out there. But the second way is like Chat GPT, Claude, and some of these other models. You could turn on a feature where it remembers stuff about you. Now that's really awesome. Like I use it. I have a Chat GPT disk for business that I use all the time because it knows everything about my business because I've talked to it about it. But you could see that being a problem if you're searching for something and you want to try to find the truth and it's trained on what you personally believe. It's going to give you that answer because it gets punished when it doesn't give you the right answer. And that's its entire purpose in life is to like answer the way it wants. The best way to say this is like if I said the cow jumped over the what?
Fence.
The moon. The moon, right?
Oh.
The cow jumped over the moon, Aaron. that's
Never heard it.
oh, you make me sad. I'm so old. That's a phrase, okay? The cow jumped over the moon. It's a nursery rhyme, but whatever. The point is, that's what ChatGPT is doing at a grander scale. Like, it knows the next word, and then it's trying to give you an answer based off of those words that it thinks that you want to hear. So
one that I've heard from members of the church a couple years ago, I heard this for the first time. Someone posted this as a Facebook status, demonstrating the veracity of, the plan of salvation as we commonly preach it: believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. They asked ChatGPT, what must I do to be saved according to the Bible? And it gave that same answer. And this was presented as if it was, just further evidence to the truthfulness of that plan of salvation. Is this more of the same?
yeah, it's more of the same. It could just been luck of the draw, or it could have been that it knew a little bit about that person, so it gave that answer. Um, this is what I mean by the kind of the echo chamber effect that I'm really worried about. It is that I do believe it already has become authoritative for a lot of people, and it's going to become more authoritative as we go on. And that's a great example of that. As somebody using as Bible, for their personal Bible study, and like, oh, here's proof that I know I'm right. It's like,
Yeah.
we do this, and I'm not trying to be mean, but we do this when we name drop. Oh, Ronnie Wade agrees with me. Well, okay, well, maybe Ronnie Wade was wrong. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe we're both right. Who knows? But like, you're adding credibility to what you believe, and that really bothers me when people use name dropping and AI in this way. But I do believe it's going to become more authoritative as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I just finished a book on logical fallacies, and we're talking about the authority fallacy here, the appeal to authority. And while it's the same thing, just like you said, when appealing to AI, I almost feel like we should name a separate fallacy, like the appeal to AI, because it's something that people, that they just don't think of it that way, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's going to become. Oh, it already is. I mean, I've been in conversations recently. I won't give names or anything, but I've been in conversations recently when somebody was like, "Well, I talked to ChatGPT and it said this," and I was like, "Oh, I don't know what to tell you. Like, ChatGPT is wrong." And it does. And by the way, I mentioned ChatGPT just because I'm most familiar with it. I've created a lot of pieces of software with it. I'm intimately familiar. But there's Claude, there's other ones. So just honestly, when I say ChatGPT, I mean AI in general.
Yeah, that's the one I use the most.
Yeah. There is an appeal to like, oh, I know I'm right because I talked to ChatGPT, and I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you.
Would you also clarify too? There is an AI software behind Google now. So when you enter like a question for Google, what's the best time of year? It'll give you an automatic AI overview, is what it's called, at the top of your Google search, and it summarizes, different resources and so forth that might answer that on the web. But when it does that, can you trust that? I have my own experiences to speak to.
Yeah, I mean, that's Gemini. That's all it is. It's Google's version of ChatGPT. It's just AI. So the simple answer is no. Just simply no. I think you can trust it. You can trust it like you were reading a commentary, right? There's some really good stuff in commentaries, And then all, especially if you're reading a commentary from a different denomination or something like that, you know, you by and large got some good information in there. And then every once in a while you run into something, you're like, I got to use my own mind because that doesn't sound right. And I think that's what happens with like Gemini and stuff like that. I mean, it does something. It's called ghosting. It's a lot better than when AI first came out. But ghosting is where like it just literally makes stuff up. So good example of this is I was looking up from the Antonician Fathers. I was doing a study because I was going to talk to a Catholic, and I was asking for quotes. I was asking. I don't remember exactly what I was asking for. I was asking for something, and it was like, oh, this book, this chapter, or whatever it was. And then I went and I physically looked it up, and I was like, oh, it literally doesn't exist. It made that up. It was just like lied to me. Just keep in mind, it could completely lie to you. It has no moral compass.
Yeah. And to your point, I've had the same thing happen to me. I did also look up the Ante-Nicene Fathers on the Lord's Day, I believe it was. But I always, like you said, I always go and verify. Let's get a physical copy of this or an online PDF version to verify the article and that it's saying even what the bot says it says. And I also, like on Google one time, looked up a health related question and it linked articles, where it got its info from. But when I went and actually looked at the article, because I just don't trust it, it was it contradicted what was inside the article that it linked to. And that just was my firsthand experience where I was like, whoa, okay. So not sure I can trust this all the time. Although it's helpful, but it's just, go and check for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a little off subject here, but they have AI specifically trained for like the medical industry that now is better at accurately diagnosing patients than actual doctors. But the generic chat GPT that's trained on the corpus of the internet, like Gemini, Claude, all these other ones, I mean, bad data in, bad data out. That's the best way I could say it.
Yeah. There was one thing that you haven't mentioned before we go on to the next question. You mentioned how AI, if I'm saying this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, it's built on a language model. Is that correct?
It's an LLM. What that means is that was what I was talking about, the neural net. Basically, they put a sentence in and it's trying to predict essentially the next word. I mean, that's the most basic dummy down version I can give you. Basically, they put information in, they run some calculations, and they get a number out, and that number actually represents a letter or a word, and they call them tokens is what it's really called, but that's what that is. So it's literally trained on language, and that's what I meant by like the cow jumped over the moon, that the answer is the moon. That's a common phrase. And that's what it's predicting with the neural net.
Yeah. And I thought that was helpful to know that because you gave an example of how, I don't even remember the specific example now, how it's helpful with asking language related questions more than, for example, ChatGPT, using it for the example, is not as good at generating pictures according to prompts that you put in, but it's better at generating language based questions.
Yeah. So in fact, what you don't see under the hood of these models is when it generates an image, that's actually a different AI. So they're taking language and then they're converting it into a neural net, and they're trying to get an image out of it. So it's pretty cool, but you got to remember it's still in its infancy. I mean, it's only like a year old that we've been able to do this. And there's a video out there like of Will Smith or something like that trying to eat biscotti or something like that, and it's this horrible video. And then they show it like a year later, and it's like, wow, like I I can tell that that's AI, but I guarantee maybe 50% of the audience couldn't.
And that's true. I mean, I've used it enough too. I know exactly what you're talking about. When you spend enough time around somebody, like their language, words they use and stuff. And it's the same way with ChatGPT. I can tell when somebody's speaking most of the time, and they're reading something that they got right off of ChatGPT because it kind of speaks like a bot.
It has a tone, a tonality. It's just like if you ever read somebody's writing, and I've done this a lot. Like oh, Joe Norton wrote something, and then you're reading it and you're literally listening to it in Joe Norton's voice. And you're like, wow, that does sound just like Joe Norton. But I can tell now, and I've seen this quite a bit actually, where somebody has wrote a lesson with ChatGPT and they got up there and spoke it. And I'm like, that's not them. Like, I know ChatGPT, I know the voice of this AI. Now you can trick it. You can take a bunch of your own actual written literature and put it in ChatGPT, and it can try to mimic you. We had a preacher. I had a preacher call me and ask me, can he mimic the Alexander Campbell voice? And he did. He said, "Oh man, it was Alexander Campbell's voice, but it wasn't his writing." And I was like, "How do you know?" And he goes, "Well, it used his words, but it didn't have his tonality." And I was like, "Yeah, that's right." It's right, because
There's only one preacher that I know of that would be able to give that answer.
if I'm allowed to name drop, I'll name drop.
No need. We're going to leave all this anonymous. No names. Well, you kind of broached question number 4 here, but let's go back, and I want to ask you: do you use AI in your Bible study and your sermon writing? And if you do, I'm pretty sure you do. How do you incorporate it?
Well, the first part of the question, absolutely, not even a question. I use AI. In fact, on my computer up here, I have like 6 tabs of AI open. I mean, I use it on my phone. I mean, I have it on my tab. I mean, I use it every day, like probably more than anybody else. But as far as Bible study goes, yes, I do. And I think there needs to be some limitations on using it. That's just my personal opinion from my experience and interaction with it. One of the things that I think it does brilliant on, it is the best Thompson Chain Bible in existence. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've literally been sitting in a Bible study and somebody asked me a question. I'm like, I know there's a verse on this, but I don't remember where it's at. And being able to get Chat GPT open and just, hey, I know there's a verse that sounds something like this, and it just bam. I remember I was sitting at a preacher's house one time, and somebody came in and asked, this preacher, hey, where is this Bible verse out? And they're like, I know it says something like this. It's in Isaiah or something like that. And they were going back and forth for like 20 minutes trying to find this verse. And I'm just giggling because I had picked my phone up and I typed what this woman said and hit enter, and the verse was sitting right there. And I watched them 20 minutes trying to find this verse before I finally was like, here's the verse. In that way, I think it's amazing. Before you would use like a Strong's Concordance trying to find a word, and then you got Thompson Chains that made it a little easier, and then you kind of got Google, and now I think this is just the next iteration of that. So for that, especially if you're studying like complicated subjects, like if you want to, I want all the verses that talk about agape love. Okay, I mean that's a pretty exhausting task. Well, ChatGPT or one of these AI models can give you that list. So I use it for that all the time. It's probably the number one thing. Go ahead.
Do you find it to be pretty accurate whenever doing exhaustive searches like that?
I mean, as accurate as like Google was or Thompson Chain. I mean, Thompson Chain isn't even perfect. I mean, I found connections, and I'm like, I don't think there's a connection between those two verses. Same thing as like Logos. I mean, actually, I have Logos. I have more money than I care to admit in books in Logos, but I almost don't use it anymore because I downloaded all those books and I put it in Chat GPT, and I could talk to my books now. But I think it's as accurate as all the other methods. As always, do your research. Go look up the Bible verse. Don't just blindly trust it. I find like when it gives you a verse, if you tell it the translations, and that doesn't mean that it's perfect, but I've yet to find it give a verse wrong, like type it out wrong if you tell it what translations. Now, maybe it's just I've got lucky, but I still, even then, I go to an actual like Bible program and I copy a verse over into my lessons.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't trust it enough to just blindly copy and paste directly from ChatGPT because I think there was a verse once that it did It wasn't dramatically off, but it was enough off that I was like, I'm just going to go to the software.
And then the second, kind of way I use it. Now I don't know about you, but my mind is all over the place. So when I'm studying something, I just have a notepad and I just throw stuff in. And as I think of ideas, like, oh, that'd be a good illustration for this verse, or, and then I'll type my illustrations in, or, and then I'll go back through and study all my verses and stuff like that. Once I get all that just pile of information on a lesson, which is probably why it takes me so long to put a lesson together, but then I go through and I'm like, how am I going to outline this? Like, what is a good flow for this? This is something I use Chat GPT for. Is like, hey, like, here's all my notes. Can you put this in a good flow? That for me has been amazing. Now, it's not always good, but it gives you, for me at least, it gives a general direction for me. And so it allows me to like kind of go from there. The other thing that I use it for, it's kind of a parallel to this idea of Bible study, but I think it helps. So one of the things I did is I took a bunch of my lessons and I recorded them and I put it into an AI model and I asked it, hey, if you're a visitor, how would you perceive this lesson? And it was interesting. I was expecting like come back with some doctrinal thing or something like that. No, you know what it said is when you say the invitation song is 203, it was like nobody knows what an invitation song is. I was like, oh, the song after their lesson is song 203. And so there's been subtle language shifts that I have made so that if there is a visitor, it's a little bit more inviting. Also, I've ran some of my lessons as I'm practicing them through a model and be like, what do you think about this? And it was like, hey, you may not intend this, but this is coming across really harsh. You need to change your language here. Like, and so it's helped me give me some feedback, kind of like I would do with a person. It's allowed me to get actual life feedback. But as everything, I still use my own mind, my own judgment. I still think through these things myself. And I think that's really where it needs to stop. Use it. I think you could use it up to the point that you blindly trust it. And the moment that you cross that line, I think that's the danger zone. When you allow it to write your lessons for you, when you become lazy, when you're not doing your due diligence as you read and studying to be a good Bible student or studying to be a good Christian or knowing the Bible for yourself, that's something that I think that's going to be a problem.
Amen to that. Well, that's actually one of the next questions is warnings. Uh, Before we move to that, a couple of things I use it for. I found it to be very helpful for constructing tables. I usually use PowerPoint, and I had like a sermon on the Lord's Supper, and I wanted to create a why do we do this, who partakes of it, when do we partake of it, just like a table like that, like answering all the Q's and W's, and it was not visually attractive, and I did have to add and tweak some stuff content wise, but it just gave me a fantastic table idea, and most of it was pretty good as was. So then I adapted it, and that's not like I didn't use that as part of my sermon. It was really just a slide, like after the sermon. Hey, if you wanted to look at this table later, as a summary of everything, and so I like it for that. There was one brother I found out just recently told me a teacher at his congregation told him that he will debate with ChatGPT on whatever topic that he's teaching on, and he'll say to ChatGPT like, "Okay, we're going to talk about should a Christian, let's say, for example, fight in the military. You take the affirmative, I'll take the negative, and then after it's done, he's done arguing with it, like in a debate style. Then he'll flip it and say, okay, now you take the negative, and I'll take the affirmative." And I thought that was brilliant. I've not tried it yet, but it allows you to anticipate what objectors might be thinking of.
Yeah. To that end, I've done a lot of studies with like hermeneutics and stuff like that, and um, I actually take that and I put it in ChatGPT, and I do exactly what you just said. Is I'm like, just tell me if you were opposing this, where's the critiques and why? And it's helped me refine my own thought, and a few times found some flaws in my own reasoning, my own thinking, that I was like, ooh, I need to go back through and rethink that. That's a good point. So yeah, I think that's brilliant. I
You mean that you're wrong?
mean, it happens.
Just kidding, just kidding. Okay, let's see here. We got into the warnings a little bit. There's more that we could say if we really dug deep about, the pros of ways to use it in Bible study. I wanted to affirm what you said about using it for like scripture discovery on a certain topic. You're wanting more of a topical index as opposed to like if you go into blueletterbible.org, you have to put in the exact word, the exact spelling, the correct tense of that word that you're wanting to find the Bible passage for. ChatGPT is a lot easier. But warnings for people that use it, let's get into that. What would you've kind of already ushered that a little bit, but give us some examples of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so we already kind of talked about this, but being authoritative, particularly talking to people that are not Christians, I think that's going to become an issue. Is the one thing that I think we need to be very mindful of, particularly now, probably more than ever, is that when you give an argument, make sure it's a good one. Like, make sure it's sound and thought through, because you're probably not fighting with just that person. You're now fighting with an AI, and I've already experienced that. And so that's one of the warnings I give in the evangelistic side, but more particularly in the Bible study side, is not thinking for yourself. Just like reading a commentary. And man, we've all seen this. We've all experienced this. Some young brethren, young teacher. I don't want to say young person, young teacher. Gives a lesson, and then you're like, I remember hearing almost that exact phrase and words, and then you go back and you look in some commentary, and like, he literally just copied the chapter. Like, he didn't even think for himself. Like, that's crazy to me. Just like a commentary, I would give caution to not just blindly following it. That's the same caution I would give to AI. The other thing is it's so convincing. I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this, Aaron, but like, it is so convincing on some things. Like, if you didn't have a sound mind, or you weren't rooted in scripture for you, like yourself, man, it could so easily lead you astray. I mean, it really could, because it's so convincing. And I think people need to be aware, in the positive and in the negative, that it's so convincing. Maybe it's convincing and you both agree on this topic, and maybe it's convincing and it's leading you down a path that maybe you shouldn't be led down. I feel, out of all the issues that we're going to experience with AI in studying and lessons and stuff, it's 100% going to be people just blindly copying and paste. We already see this with like, and by the way, I have no problem with people copying other people's lessons. I think especially for younger people, that's all. It takes a lot of footwork, but it's when you copy the words. It's when you copy everything. It's where you obviously didn't do the study. One of the things that I attempt as much as I can is that if I'm going to use a Bible verse, I try to know the context of which that Bible verse is being said. And that extra study is a lot of extra footwork, but man, in your lessons, I think this, is it shines. And it's little things, that you say that you could tell. And so I think, in that same way that people just blindly copy lessons, I think you're going to start seeing this with ChatGPT and AI in general. And that, to me, that is, it becomes easier. And as time goes on, right now, as we said, ChatGPT has a voice. Claude, if you don't know about Claude's another AI. It has a voice. Gemini has a voice, and I could distinguish between the voices because they are different. I think we're going to get to a point at some point that that's not the case. That I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I think it's going to get to a point where you could put enough data into it, and it sounds like you. That it's convincing.
Yeah. Oh, I believe that. Just like videos, like there's going to be a point where you will not be able to tell if it's AI created or not.
You're going to have movies that are completely made by AI. I mean, they're already trying to do it. It's almost there. And if that's there, I mean, we're just not that much farther away from, yeah.
And what scares me about that is just the way that people will use it, no doubt, to slander people and exploit them as saying things that they never said or did. And I just, does make you afraid if you dwell on it too long. I mean, you can't really do anything about it, so why really think about it? But just being aware of it in advance and warning people in advance, I think at least we can do that. There was something. Oh, go ahead.
You know, you're talking there, and I was just thinking, there's something about gaining wisdom over time and letting it marinate. Especially like I mean, how many times have you read the Bible, the same verse, and you reread it, you're like, oh, how did I miss that? Right? There's some wisdom there with letting stuff marinate. And what I see is that we're gonna have knowledge without wisdom.
Mm.
And I fear that more with like, correction and discipline and maybe not just those, but those are the ones I think could be abused. Is like, am I justified in doing this? Like, man, having all the knowledge in the world at your fingertip, which essentially is what you have now, with no wisdom, is so devastating. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where I'm like, I know this is I'm confident this is the right thing to do. This is how I'm going to handle this situation. And then you call someone that's older and they're like, that's a terrible idea. That's a horrible idea. Like that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. Like, here's what you're going to do. And then when they say it, you're like, oh, that's okay. That totally makes sense. Like, or how many times somebody has called me and was like, hey, Chris, I want to do this. And you're like, that's a terrible idea. Why would you think that was okay?
Yeah.
Knowledge without wisdom. And that's what ChatGPT gives us. That's what AI gives us. I just thought about that. Man, I don't want to dwell on that too much, but that.
No, that's good. I'm glad you dropped that. That was very good. You did say something about sermons, and I did want to say this before we move on from warnings. But I've heard both ends of the spectrums in terms of preaching other people's sermons. I've heard one preacher go so far as to say, if you preach somebody else's sermon without crediting them, then you are plagiarizing, and this is unethical. And of course, that's what we're taught in the college realm. I think, I'm not willing to go that far. For example, like my dad, he's famous for putting all of his content on his website publicly, and if anybody wants to preach it, go ahead. His rationale is it comes from the Word of God, so you're just using that's his rationale for it, and I can respect that. However, when I personally do preach somebody else's material, whether it's in large chunks or maybe I don't know if I've ever just preached somebody's sermon. But I will say, this is largely coming from this book or from this other preacher's sermon that I heard. And I do think that that's good to be transparent like that, because it allows your audience to know, oh, okay, he's being honest. So that automatically should gain some trust. And you want to be honest and just for the sake of being honest. But also, the other end of that spectrum is what you were alluding to, when people allow AI to write their entire sermon, or they preach somebody else's sermon word for word, and you can tell when you're listening to them. You can totally tell just because there's a lot of times with eye contact, if somebody's looking up from their notes, they typically know the material. And some people can rehearse something so long they can even look up from their notes and rehearse somebody's material, but there's just little subtleties. I think you mentioned it, little inserts, and you can just tell when somebody's got original thought and when they're just not thinking for themselves. And I don't respect somebody that doesn't think for themselves. I'll just say it on public radio. I do not respect you when you don't study for yourself and show to me that you've put the time in to study this. If you haven't put the time in to study it, why should I put in the time in to listen to what you're telling me? Because it's not even coming from you.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Aaron. I think the in fact, maybe just getting a little off subject here, but when I hold Bible studies with like kind of newer Christians and stuff like that, the one thing, we all the Bible studies when I came into the church were all focused on doctrinal things, and I'm very thankful that I had that foundation very quickly. But one of the things that I wish that would have been done and that I strive to do is I want people to learn how to think for themselves. Not how to think like Chris Jones, but how to think for themselves. And so though I'm teaching those fundamental foundational things, I make people in my studies answer before I'll tell them what I think. I'll make them think through something because I think the number one biggest skill that we can have, and maybe you're not good at it, and I think that's fine, but you got to learn how to do it. Is think for yourself
Yeah.
and process things for yourself because it's so devastating when that doesn't happen. Yeah.
Ron Quarter, who I allude to a lot because I studied with him for about a year. Um, I I started off moving up there in his basement. He put a few books on my desk, and he just recommended me taking a look at these. Well, then every time that I would ask him a question, he would say, let me think about that. And he would come over like 30 minutes later, and he would plop two books down on top of the books that were already there. It's like those would be pretty good to look at to find the answer to that. And then I eventually learned at some point to stop asking questions because I had way more than I could read. And he would integrate an answer in what he actually thought every now and then. But I learned after the fact, he was doing this intentionally to make me look for myself and think for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably the bigger skill set to teach a new Christian or to teach anybody is can you think for yourself? And I think it's really important. And I think that's what AI does, right? So this is what AI takes away, right? We're talking about the dangers of AI here. What it takes away is it takes away your own thinking. And I have seen this with men that I know that are clearly using AI to generate lessons, to generate thoughts, to generate rebuttals. So, and I've seen that a few times, and it is just devastating. I just it breaks my heart to see that happen because it's unfortunately I know people have done this for years now, and it's scary. It's very scary to me. So
Yeah.
I can't think of anything. There's probably 1,000 more things that you could be worried about, and the dangers of using it. But yeah,
Yeah, and there are. I mean, as far as the dangers of AI, we were talking about before we got on here. There's definitely other things that we could definitely talk about in terms of that affect our Christian faith and our walk. But we're focusing on Bible study today, and so we're going to limit ourselves to that. So, last question I had for you is: what are some things about AI that you anticipate in the future that are going to affect this category of Bible study, teaching, and the like?
yeah. So we kind of already mentioned this, but I just think it's going to get better, and it's going to get more convincing, and it's going to be able to mimic voices even more profound than it does now. And you already got to the point where it can almost mimic a voice. If you didn't know this, like they have models now where you can go and you can sign up for these subscriptions, and it copies your voice, and it it sounds like a person. It sounds like you. It's creepy. A year ago, I made a video and I put it on our Faith Uncovered channel, and it's probably our most successful video, and it's 100% from start to finish AI generated, and it uses a preacher I know, my best friend. It uses his voice, and it sounds just like him. It is so creepy, and that was a year ago, and it's only got better. So I think those are some of the things in the future that I think is going to get a little bit more scary. The other thing is, just like Google knows everything about you. I mean, if you didn't know this, I don't care who you are. If you exist as a human being, Google knows about you. Whether you have interacted on the internet or not, I think AI is going to be that way too. And that means it's going to start tailoring answers to you, whether you turn that feature on or not. And it's going to get better at persuading you whether you like it or not. I think those are some of the maybe the big dangers as far as Bible studies is concerned. It's just going to get better.
Well, good warnings. I thought this was just very helpful. I know enough people are asking me about this, and then I heard from multiple people how they've heard entire sermons that were AI generated. Um, some of them were speculation, but some of them were confirmed. So it's not all speculation. I myself have listened to at least one sermon that I was like, this is just way too good of material for somebody at this age. Like, this is something I would expect from someone that's 25 at the least, not from somebody that's this young starting out. And I don't have anything beyond that just to base it on. But, when you have AI out there like it is, that's kind of stuff like that makes me think.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this is way when I first started teaching. This would have been nearly 20 years ago at this point, or 18 years or six, I don't know, whatever it was years ago. I had stolen a phrase from a preacher, and it was like a catchphrase, and I really liked it, and because it went along with what he believed on a passage. And I remember I gave that, and I didn't give credit, which I agree with you. We should be giving credit, but he somebody came up to me asking, was, "Oh, that's what brother so and so believes, and that's what he says." And I was like, "Oh, oops."
Well, I know a preacher who quoted this really great phrase, and I heard him quote it in a lot of his sermons, and I always thought, this is so good. Well, later in time, I found this quote from Ravi Zacharias, and I realized this was not that preacher's original phrase, which is not a huge deal to me. I mean, I didn't think less of him. It was just kind of like, that was what we were dealing with before AI, and now with AI, it's probably going to be a lot more prevalent.
I say it like
But
this: I give credit the first time, and the second time I've always said, right? Isn't that how?
yeah, no, that's how it works. There's a more formal summary of that, but yeah, that's how it works. As a summary of everything, we talked about the benefits, the cons, and the future. But it's a great topical index. When you use it, understand the software and how it operates, which you gave a good introduction to, which may have been boring for some people, but I do think it's very important stuff. And the ultimate thing is that, like you said, think for yourself, just like you would when you're reading a commentary, and give credit, where it's due. I think those are all good pieces of advice. Anything else that I left off there?
No, I can't think of anything other than thank you for having me on, talking about this subject. I think it's really important. We are not talking about it at large across the brotherhood, and I definitely think we need to be talking about this subject more.
Hey, before you go, drop the name of your website and anything you're working on right now online.
One of the things that I and my Aaron Newman is working on is we have a website called mychurchofchrist.com. It houses the digital directory, and so if you see any accuracies of that digital directory, please let us know. We also have a bunch of literature that we are trying to revive, and booklets and stuff like tracks like that. So if you have booklets or tracks like that, we just ask you, please let us know. We'll try to get those revived. And we're trying to just bring back not only the digital side, right? Very much into AI, but I'm also into physical materials. We also own a full-blown printing company, so we can get the cost of that material down so that we can distribute it significantly cheaper. So those are some of the projects that I've been working on kind of in the background. And if you want to support that or want to get involved in that, just hit me or Aaron Newman up, and you can email us at admin@mychurchofchrist.com.
Cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate the work you do. Appreciate taking the time to come on here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.